communism, Fidel, censorship, embargo, missile crisis, dictatorship. These are all things that come to mind when Americans think of Cuba. But do we truly understand the country that's only 90 miles away? Or is our image of the nation twisted by biased press and political agendas? In March of 2012, 11 students boarded a Cubana Airlines flight to Havana in search of the true story behind the island of Cuba. Europeans first reached Cuba in the 15th century, with Columbus landing on the island in 1492. First, it was a Spanish colony. The British had the island for a little while in 1762, but it turned out they preferred Florida, so they traded Cuba back to the Spanish. The Spanish had the island for a good while longer, but then America got involved, and after a bit of fighting, the Spanish left and Cuba got its independence. That was 1902. In 1940, a guy named Batista won an election and became the president. He was alright at first, but accused of corruption, Batista wasn't expected to be re-elected in 1952, so he staged a coup and seized power. Though statistically Batista brought economic expansion, he favored the rich, which never works out well. His reign ended with the Cuban Revolution and America's favorite man, Fidel Castro. Ever since Fidel Castro openly expressed his distaste for the United States, the Cuban-American relationship has been rough. Our understanding of the country has therefore been twisted, as we see a poor, starving, rigid communist country. In reality, that is everything but the truth. When looking at Cuba, one could easily make the assumption that the country is collapsing. Peeling paint and deteriorating buildings riddle the streets. But the lack of building repairs disguises a very intelligent and culturally rich country, operated not by a strict dictatorship, but by a providing government. One of Cuba's primary focuses is education. In 1961, after the success of the Cuban Revolution, the government began the Cuban Literacy Campaign, which over the course of 1 year raised the country's literacy rate from 60 to 96%. Over 700,000 adults were taught to read and write. Currently, Cuba has the second highest literacy rate in the world, and while Cuba may not have the best education facilities, the system is very efficient and effective. As our group visited schools, we began to discover that the Cuban government successfully fulfills all of its citizens' basic needs, including food, education, and healthcare. The Cuban government also invests heavily in its culture and its arts. Art schools develop young artists from an early age, and this extra attention pays off. The Cuban ballet is one of the best in the world, and art surrounds Cubans in their daily lives. We visited the home of José Fuster, an artist who has redecorated countless buildings in his neighborhood on the outskirts of Havana. Cuba is also famous for its music, home to the Buena Vista Social Club and other great musicians. One other element embedded deep into the culture of Cuba is baseball, a symbol of Cuban national pride. Many American baseball players are actually from Cuba, and the country itself has over 25 different baseball teams. After Fidel Castro stepped down, his brother Raúl took over as president. When speaking of the Cuban-American relationship, he said, "Good relations would be mutually advantageous." This new direction towards a better Cuban-American relationship can hopefully allow all Americans to see what we saw and to truly understand the country of Cuba.